There is a silent force inside you. It speaks in impulses. It hides in reactions. It disguises itself as just the way I am. And if you never confront it, it will quietly design your life for you. The partners you choose, the money you earn, the arguments you repeat, the fears you cannot explain. Most people believe they are making conscious decisions, but psychology tells us something unsettling. A large portion of our daily behavior is automatic. Studies in cognitive science suggest that much of our processing happens beneath awareness, shaped by patterns formed in childhood, reinforced by trauma, and protected by defense mechanisms. If you do not bring these hidden forces into the light, they will operate you like invisible strings, and you will call it fate. Tonight, we are going deeper, because until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life. Have you ever overreacted and then sat alone afterward, replaying the moment in your mind, wondering why something so small felt so enormous? A simple comment feels like an attack. A delayed reply feels like rejection. Constructive criticism feels like humiliation. You tell yourself you're just sensitive, or tired, or stressed. But the truth is deeper. The intensity of your reaction is rarely about the present moment. It is about the past resurfacing through the doorway of now. Imagine a man who grew up with a highly critical parent. Nothing he did was ever enough. A 95 was met with, "Where did the other 5 go?" Love was conditional. Approval was fragile. As a child, he learned that mistakes meant withdrawal of affection. His nervous system wired itself around vigilance. Now he is an adult in a corporate office. His boss calmly says, "This report needs a few revisions." And suddenly his chest tightens, his jaw locks. Heat rises in his face. He feels exposed, diminished, threatened. He believes his boss is unfair. He thinks, "Why am I being targeted?" But the truth is quieter and more ancient. His nervous system is not responding to his boss. It is responding to a memory. An old wound has been touched. Neuroscience shows that emotional memories are stored in brain regions like the amygdala, which acts as an alarm system. When a present situation resembles a past hurt, even slightly, the brain does not carefully analyze the difference. It reacts as if the original pain is happening again. Your body remembers what your mind has forgotten. This is the unconscious at work. It hides beneath your awareness, but it shapes your perception. It colors neutral events with old meanings. It turns small moments into emotional earthquakes. And because you do not see the hidden layer, you blame the present. You blame your partner. You blame your boss. You blame the world. But what you are often fighting is history. Your triggers are not your enemy. They are clues. They are signals pointing toward unfinished conversations with your past. Every disproportionate reaction carries a message. There is something here that still hurts. The problem is that most of us were never taught to decode these signals. We were taught to suppress them, to be strong, to let it go, to move on without understanding. So the wound goes underground. And what goes underground does not disappear. It grows roots. A woman who felt emotionally abandoned as a child may feel panic when her partner needs space. She may accuse, cling, or withdraw, believing she is reacting to the present distance. But beneath the surface, a younger version of her is terrified of being left again. A man who was mocked for showing emotion may lash out in anger when he feels vulnerable. Anger feels powerful. Vulnerability feels dangerous. So the unconscious chooses the emotion that once ensured survival. These reactions are not signs that you are broken. They are signs that you adapted. At some point, your response made sense. It protected you. It kept you safe in an environment where you had limited control. But what protects you as a child can imprison you as an adult. When you begin to notice your triggers, not judge them, not justify them, but simply observe them, you take the first step toward freedom. The next time you feel that surge of emotion, pause. Instead of asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" ask, "When have I felt this before?" Instead of attacking outward, turn inward with curiosity. What does this remind me of? Who did this feeling originally belong to? How old do I feel right now? You may be surprised to discover that beneath your adult reaction is a younger self still waiting to be heard. Awareness transforms reaction into choice. Without awareness, your trigger pulls you like a puppet string. With awareness, there is space. And in that space, you can decide. You can choose to respond rather than explode. You can communicate rather than accuse. You can soothe yourself rather than demand that others fix your pain. This is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming conscious. When you shine light on your triggers, they lose their power to ambush you. They become teachers instead of tyrants. Each one reveals where healing is needed. Each one invites you to integrate a forgotten part of yourself. And slowly, something shifts. Criticism no longer feels like annihilation. Silence no longer feels like abandonment. Conflict no longer feels like proof of unworthiness, because you begin to realize the present moment is not the past. The unconscious loses its grip the moment you see it clearly, and the child within you, who once reacted out of fear, begins to trust that the adult you have become is finally awake. From the moment you entered this world, you began learning a silent lesson. Who must I become to be loved? As a child, survival was not just physical. It was emotional. You depended on caregivers not only for food and shelter, but for approval, attention, and belonging. So you studied the environment carefully. You observed what was rewarded and what was punished, and without realizing it, you adapted. You became the responsible one, or the strong one, or the funny one, or the invisible one. Perhaps you were praised for being mature beyond your years, so you buried your childish needs. Perhaps you were noticed only when you performed well, so achievement became your identity. Perhaps conflict frightened your home, so you learned to be agreeable, soft, accommodating. What you built was not fake. It was intelligent. It was necessary, but it was a mask, a social identity crafted carefully to earn love, approval, and safety. And over time, you forgot that it was a mask at all. You began to believe this is who I am. The high achiever says, I'm just disciplined. But beneath the discipline is a quiet terror of being worthless if they stop producing. They cannot rest, because rest threatens their identity. If they are not succeeding, who are they? The nice person says, I'm just kind. But inside, resentment quietly accumulates. They cannot say no. They cannot express anger, because conflict threatens the image they have spent years protecting. If they disappoint someone, they feel as if they will lose love entirely. This is the cost of over-identifying with the persona. Research on self-concept suggests that when identity becomes rigid, anxiety increases. Why? Because maintaining a fixed image requires constant effort. You must monitor yourself, suppress certain emotions, amplify others, stay consistent with the character you've written. It is exhausting to perform yourself all the time. And yet, the parts of you that did not fit the script do not vanish. They sink into the unconscious, your anger, your ambition, your jealousy, your vulnerability, your desire for recognition, your need for rest. You told yourself these traits were unacceptable, so you pushed them down, but what you repress does not dissolve. It waits, and when you refuse to acknowledge these disowned parts, they begin to leak out sideways. The high achiever burns out. Their body collapses under the weight of constant proving. They secretly sabotage opportunities because success no longer satisfies them. The nice person explodes one day over something small. Years of swallowed anger erupt all at once. Everyone is shocked. That's not like you, they say, but it is like them. It is simply the part they refuse to see. The unconscious is patient. It will wait years to be recognized, but it will not be silenced forever. You may notice it in quiet moments, when you feel strangely empty despite external success, when you sense that people love the version of you that performs, but not the version that feels confused, messy, unsure. You may notice it late at night, when the mask slips slightly, and you ask yourself a dangerous question. Who am I when no one is watching? Not who do they expect me to be, not who gets applause, not who avoids criticism, but who am I beneath the performance? This question can feel terrifying, Because if you loosen your grip on the persona, you risk disappointing people. You risk being misunderstood. You risk losing the identity that once protected you. But you also gain something extraordinary: wholeness. Making the unconscious conscious means daring to explore the parts of yourself you once rejected. It means admitting that you have anger and learning how to express it without cruelty. It means admitting that you desire more and allowing yourself to pursue it without shame. It means admitting that you are tired and permitting yourself to rest. It is not about destroying the persona. The mask served a purpose. It helped you survive. But survival is not the same as living. Integration, not perfection, is freedom. Integration means allowing your strength and your softness to coexist, your competence and your confusion, your kindness and your boundaries, your ambition and your vulnerability. When you integrate, you no longer have to perform constantly. You no longer panic when someone sees a flaw. You no longer cling to one rigid identity. You become fluid, and something shifts inside you. You start choosing actions not because they protect an image, but because they align with your truth. You say no without feeling like a villain. You rest without feeling like a failure. You succeed without feeling like a fraud. The energy once spent maintaining a mask becomes available for growth. You realize that the people who truly belong in your life are not those who adore your persona, but those who can handle your wholeness. The moment you stop trying to be a perfect character and start becoming an integrated human being, anxiety softens. The inner war quiets, because you are no longer divided against yourself. And in that unity, you discover something profound. You were never meant to be a flawless image. You were meant to be real. Have you ever paused in the middle of a painful situation and felt a strange sense of familiarity? Different person, different year, different setting, yet the same emotional ending. You date someone new, but the dynamic feels hauntingly similar. At first, everything seems different until the distance creeps in, the misunderstanding grows, the same ache returns. You promise yourself you won't tolerate certain behaviors again, and yet somehow you do. You earn more money than you ever have, but the financial stress remains. It changes shape, debt becomes lifestyle inflation, scarcity becomes fear of losing it all, but the anxiety is identical. You enter new environments determined to avoid drama, yet conflicts find you in eerily familiar forms. It feels as though life is repeating itself, and you begin to wonder, why does this keep happening to me? The honest answer is unsettling. Because the unconscious seeks resolution. There is a hidden part of you that is not interested in comfort as much as it is interested in completion. When something in your early emotional life remained unresolved, it does not simply disappear with time. It waits, it searches, it recreates. Psychologists call this repetition compulsion, the tendency to unconsciously recreate unresolved emotional situations in an attempt to finally master them. Imagine a woman who felt emotionally abandoned as a child. Perhaps her parents were overwhelmed, distant, or preoccupied. She learned early that love felt inconsistent. She internalized a quiet belief: love must be chased, love must be earned, love may disappear. As an adult, she does not consciously think, I want someone unavailable. In fact, she desperately wants stability. But when she meets someone emotionally distant, something inside her activates. The dynamic feels familiar. The longing feels familiar. The anxiety feels familiar. It feels like chemistry. But what she calls chemistry may actually be recognition. A part of her is trying to return to the original wound, not because she enjoys suffering, but because she is unconsciously hoping to rewrite the ending. If she can finally make this distant person stay, if she can finally be enough, then maybe the old pain will resolve. But until she recognizes the pattern, she will call it bad luck. She will say, why do I always attract emotionally unavailable people? But attraction is rarely random. It is programming. The unconscious mind is shaped by early experiences. It forms internal templates about love, success, conflict, and self-worth. These templates quietly guide choices, preferences, and reactions. You believe you are freely choosing, but often you are selecting what feels familiar. Familiar does not mean healthy. It means known. A man who grew up in chaos may feel strangely uncomfortable in calm relationships. Stability feels boring. Predictability feels suspicious. So he unconsciously creates drama through jealousy, withdrawal, or conflict, because chaos feels like home. A person raised in financial insecurity may unconsciously sabotage abundance. When money increases, anxiety increases. They overspend, procrastinate, or make risky decisions, not because they are careless, but because scarcity is what their nervous system understands. Until awareness enters the picture, the pattern feels like fate. But it is not fate, it is repetition. And repetition is a message. When you begin to observe recurring themes in your life, you step into a higher level of consciousness. You stop focusing only on the external characters in the story and begin examining the script itself. Instead of asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" you ask a far more powerful question: "What part of me keeps choosing this?" That question changes everything, because it shifts you from victim to participant. It does not mean you blame yourself for every hardship. It means you become curious about your role in the pattern. You examine the beliefs operating beneath awareness. What feels familiar to me? What dynamic feels strangely comfortable, even if it hurts? What am I unconsciously trying to prove or fix? When you dare to look at these questions honestly, the spell begins to break. You start recognizing early warning signs. You notice when attraction feels intense but unstable. You catch yourself justifying behavior you once promised you would not tolerate. You feel the urge to recreate chaos, and instead you pause. That pause is power. The unconscious loses its grip when it becomes visible. Patterns cannot survive sustained awareness. Once you see the script clearly, you are no longer condemned to perform it. And something profound happens. You begin choosing differently, not because you force yourself, but because you understand yourself. You choose partners who feel safe rather than intoxicating. You choose financial habits rooted in stability rather than fear. You choose conversations that resolve conflict rather than repeat it. The repetition was never a curse. It was a lesson waiting to be learned. Life repeats what you refuse to recognize. But the moment you recognize it, the cycle weakens. And for the first time, you realize that the story was not happening to you. It was asking you to wake up. There is something deeply uncomfortable about this truth. The qualities that irritate you most in others often reflect aspects of yourself you have denied. The arrogance you despise, the laziness you criticize, the selfishness you condemn. Pay attention to the intensity of your reaction. It is rarely mild. It carries emotional charge, a tightening in your chest, a silent judgment in your mind, sometimes even anger. Why does it bother you so much? Because projection is one of the most subtle and powerful defense mechanisms of the psyche. It allows the mind to disown traits that threaten your self-image by assigning them to someone else. Instead of admitting, "I am capable of selfishness," you focus on how selfish everyone else is. Instead of recognizing your own hunger for validation, you condemn others for being attention-seeking. It feels cleaner that way, safer. You get to preserve the identity you've built about who you are. You tell yourself, "I am not like that." But the shadow does not disappear just because you refuse to look at it. Imagine someone who grew up in an environment where ambition was discouraged. Maybe they were told not to outshine others. Maybe success was labeled as prideful. Over time, they suppressed their desire to stand out. They learned to shrink themselves. They convinced themselves that being modest meant being invisible. Now they encounter someone bold, expressive, unapologetically confident. Immediately, irritation rises. "They're so egoistic," they say, "so full of themselves." But what if the irritation is not moral superiority? What if it is grief? Deep down, they fear their own desire for visibility. They buried it so deeply that seeing it expressed freely in someone else feels threatening. The confident person becomes a mirror reflecting a part of themselves they abandoned long ago. Studies in social psychology suggest that projection temporarily reduces inner anxiety. By externalizing unwanted traits, you protect your ego from internal conflict. You don't have to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself. You can maintain the illusion of being purely disciplined, purely humble, purely generous. But the relief is temporary, because what you reject internally will continue to disturb you externally. If laziness infuriates you, perhaps you have built your identity around productivity. You never allow yourself to slow down. Rest feels like weakness. Doing nothing feels dangerous. So when you see someone relaxed, unbothered, unconcerned with achievement, it threatens your entire framework of self-worth. If selfishness enrages you, perhaps you have neglected your own needs for years. You have said yes when you wanted to say no. You have sacrificed your desires to maintain harmony, and seeing someone prioritize themselves feels like an insult to your sacrifice. The reaction is not about them. It is about you. This realization requires courage, because it removes the comfort of blame. It invites you inward. The next time you feel a surge of judgment, pause before you speak. Pause before you justify your criticism. Turn your attention inward and ask yourself, what does this reveal about me? What part of myself have I refused to accept? Do not answer quickly. Sit with it. Sometimes the answer will surprise you. Sometimes it will sting. You may discover that you are not as selfless as you believed, or not as humble, or not as detached. You may find envy where you thought there was righteousness. You may find desire where you thought there was indifference. This is not about guilt. It is about integration. Integration means acknowledging that you are not made of pure light. You contain impulses, desires, weaknesses, and contradictions. You are capable of arrogance. You are capable of laziness. You are capable of selfishness. And you are also capable of discipline, generosity, and humility. Wholeness includes both. When you deny your shadow, it operates unconsciously. It leaks out in subtle ways through sarcasm, passive aggression, superiority, or secret resentment. You may believe you are above certain traits, yet they influence your behavior from behind the scenes. But when you own your shadow, something shifts. You no longer need to project it outward. You no longer need to fight others to defend your identity. The emotional charge softens. You see arrogance, and instead of reacting, you reflect. You see selfishness, and instead of condemning, you examine your boundaries. You see laziness, and instead of attacking, you ask whether you are exhausted. Owning your shadow does not mean indulging every impulse. It means recognizing your capacity for it. It means bringing unconscious patterns into awareness so they no longer control you. And when you do this, compassion grows. You become less rigid, less reactive, less threatened by the complexity of others. Because you have made peace with your own, the world stops being a battlefield of irritating personalities and becomes a hall of mirrors, each person revealing something about you. And in that awareness, you gain freedom. Because when you finally acknowledge what lives inside you, it stops seeking expression through judgment. It stops sabotaging your relationships. It stops controlling your reactions. When you own your shadow, it loses its power to rule you. And for the first time, you begin to see clearly not just who others are, but who you truly are beneath the mask of perfection. Awareness is power, but it is not gentle power. Becoming conscious is not comfortable. It is not a soft awakening where everything suddenly feels light and peaceful. It is a confrontation, a dismantling, a quiet but undeniable reckoning with yourself. It means admitting you were wrong, not just about small things, but about the stories you told yourself for years. The belief that it was always someone else's fault. The narrative that you were purely the victim. The identity you built around being misunderstood, overlooked, or unlucky. Awareness forces you to see how you contributed to your own suffering. That is not easy. It means recognizing the patterns you repeated, the red flags you ignored, the boundaries you refused to set, the truths you avoided, because facing them would have demanded change. It means grieving the version of yourself you thought you were. You thought you were just unlucky in love. Now you see your fear of intimacy. You thought you were simply driven. Now you see your terror of being insignificant. You thought you were strong. Now you see how deeply you feared vulnerability. There is a quiet sadness in this stage, because illusions, even painful ones, are familiar. They protect you from the weight of responsibility. When you wake up, you lose the comfort of unconsciousness, but you gain something far greater: liberation. When you understand your patterns, you stop being their prisoner. The man who recognizes his fear of failure realizes that his procrastination was not laziness, it was protection. He delayed action because failing would confirm his deepest insecurity. But once he names the fear, it loses its invisible control. He can take risks, not because the fear disappears, but because he understands it. The woman who acknowledges her abandonment wound stops chasing emotionally distant partners. She sees how her childhood longing shaped her adult attraction. And for the first time, she chooses someone who feels stable. Even if it does not feel as intoxicating, she chooses peace over repetition. The leader who sees their need for control understands that beneath it lies anxiety, a fear of chaos, a fear of losing relevance. When they confront this fear honestly, they begin to delegate. They build trust. They create space for others to grow. Awareness changes behavior because it changes perception. You begin to see cause and effect within yourself. You see how your thoughts shape your emotions, how your emotions influence your decisions, how your decisions create your life. And you realize that while you cannot control everything, you can control your response. But awareness requires courage because it demands excavation, therapy, journaling, meditation. These are not trends for the spiritually curious. They are tools for excavation, tools for digging beneath the surface of personality and into the deeper layers of the psyche. When you sit in silence long enough, you hear thoughts you used to outrun. When you write honestly, you uncover emotions you once denied. When you speak vulnerably in therapy, you encounter parts of yourself you buried for years. It feels uncomfortable at first, sometimes even destabilizing, because the treasure is buried beneath layers of denial, and denial is comfortable. Denial allows you to blame, to repeat, to remain unchanged. But excavation requires humility. It requires admitting, I do not know myself as well as I thought. Yet beneath the discomfort lies clarity, and once you see clearly, you cannot unsee. You cannot return to blind repetition. You cannot pretend you don't recognize your triggers. You cannot unknow the connection between your wounds and your choices. You begin to move differently. You pause before reacting. You question your impulses. You choose conversations instead of silent resentment. You love differently. You stop chasing chaos because it feels familiar. You stop settling for less because you fear loneliness. You stop demanding perfection from others because you no longer demand it from yourself. You choose differently, not from fear, not from unconscious compulsion, but from awareness. And something remarkable happens. Your life becomes intentional. You are no longer dragged by hidden forces. You are guided by conscious understanding. The unconscious does not disappear, but it becomes integrated. It becomes a source of wisdom rather than sabotage. Awareness gives you the power to rewrite your narrative, not by erasing your past, but by understanding it, not by denying your wounds, but by learning from them. Yes, it requires courage to face your shadow, to admit your blind spots, to see how you have hurt yourself and others. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to look anyway. And when you look, truly look, you discover that the parts of you you once feared were not monsters. They were unacknowledged fragments waiting to be understood. Awareness is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. And in that wholeness, you step into a new way of living, no longer ruled by unconscious patterns, but guided by conscious choice. That is power, not loud power, but quiet, transformative power that reshapes your life from the inside out. There is a version of you that operates on autopilot, driven by fear, habit, and inherited beliefs. And there is a version of you that is awake. The difference between them is awareness. Your unconscious will continue to whisper through your reactions, your patterns, your dreams, your discomfort. The question is not whether it is influencing you. It is. The question is whether you are willing to face it, because the moment you shine light into your inner darkness, it stops being your ruler and starts becoming your teacher.